In the last video, we looked at multiplying and dividing rational expressions. Well, actually, just multiplying so far. We'll get to dividing later. But multiplying rational expressions is the same as multiplying rational numbers. You multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom, and that gives you a new denominator there. Now, one other thing we need to be able to do is to simplify too. So the directions don't say to simplify here, so we don't need to do it necessarily. Let's go ahead and talk about it now just to have that help. Okay, so to factor this, again, let's look for a GCF. In the numerator, I see that we can pull out a 15, and so we'll be left with x squared plus x minus 6 all over, and we can pull out an 8 in the denominator. It'll be x squared plus 5x plus 6, like so. And then we'll factor the numerator and denominator, those quadratics, I should say. Okay, so let's see here. We'll have 15, and we need two numbers that multiply to make negative 6 and add to make a 1. So let's see, that would be positive 3 and negative 2. Okay, and then in the denominator, again, lead coefficient's 1 there, so we can just look for two numbers that multiply to 6 and add to make 5. Lead positive 2 and positive 3. Okay, so now we can see about simplifying, right? Do the 15 and 8 simplify? Sadly, no, they don't divide. Okay, I'm going to leave just my fraction here. The x plus 3's can cancel though, and I'll have with an x minus 2 in the numerator and an x plus 2 in the denominator. It's your choice if you want to then redistribute that 15 and redistribute the 8 there. I would argue it's not necessary, so you can just stop right there if you want to. Okay? Let's continue on. All right, so obviously you don't really have a neighbor to turn to right now, or you might, but they might not be doing the exact same thing right now. So we'll hold off on summarize what you've learned so far with your neighbor. Okay, just kind of think about in your head maybe what you learned so far. Okay, let's take a look at this one now. We're asked to find the following product and reduce to lowest terms. So we're going to go ahead and do that here. Okay, so let's do it a bit of a different order though. So in the earlier problem here, we multiplied first, then we factored and simplified. Okay, what we're going to do now is before we multiply these two things together, let's see if we can factor and simplify, then multiply. Okay, so let's see here. In this numerator, I see that 2x plus 6 can be written as 2 parentheses x plus 3. Right, so factor out the GCF of 2. This denominator can also factor, right? It's got a lead coefficient of 1, so we can look for two numbers that multiply to make negative 6 and add to make 1. So that would be x plus 3 and x minus 2. And then we can factor this as well, right? X squared minus 4, remember that's the same thing as saying x squared plus 0x minus 4. So we, again, lead coefficient's 1, and we're looking for two numbers that multiply to make negative 4, but add to make 0. What would those numbers be? Positive 2 and negative 2. Okay? And then over 2x like that. Now, look at this, right? We're going to multiply these things together. So we know, for example here, that all this will be in one numerator and all of this will be in one denominator. So anything in the numerator up here can cancel with anything in the denominator down here. What cancels? Well, this 2 can cancel out with that 2 exactly, right? Leaves behind 1 and a 1. This x plus 3 cancels exactly with that x plus 3. And this x minus 2 will cancel exactly with that x minus 2. So then what's left for us to multiply? Well, we have this 1 and this x plus 2, so we're going to have just an x plus 2 in the numerator. Over what's left in the denominator? This 1 and this x, so just 1x, or just plain old x like that. And there is our answer, right? No need to further simplify, because we already simplified ahead of time. Okay? Personally, I find that this is the better way to go. To simplify your multiplication problem first by factoring and then simplifying, right? Then multiplying the answers together to get your final answer there. Okay? I think it's a lot faster than multiplying first, then factoring and simplifying, okay, to get your final simplified answer. And I think you'll find the same thing too if you try it that way. All right, let's try another one. Find the following product and reduced to lowest terms. Okay, now looking at this, we have, again, this rational expression right here. You'll notice it's being raised to the negative second power. Likewise as well, we have another rational expression over here. So let's again attempt to use that same strategy that I was talking about where we're going to factor. So inside the parentheses here, that 4n minus 12, what can we factor out of that? A 4. It'll be 4 times n minus 3 over. How about 3m plus 6? What can we factor out of that? A 3 and an m plus 2. Okay, that whole quantity is still being raised to the negative second, and we'll talk about that in just a second here about how we're going to handle that. Let's continue factoring here. Go ahead and factor the numerator and denominator there. Pause the video, okay? See if you can get the numerator to factor, see if you can get the denominator to factor. Okay, hopefully you paused the video and tried factoring here. Again, factoring is super important for a lot of stuff we'll be doing in this unit. So the lead coefficient here is 1, which means we just need to look for two numbers that multiply to make negative 3 and add to make negative 2. Remember, if your lead coefficient here was something like 2, then you'd want to use that AC method where you do the A times C and then look for two numbers that multiply to make the AC and equal the B there. Okay, but since this is just lead coefficient of 1, we can just do, two numbers that multiply to negative 3, add to negative 2. So what would those be? Well, it's going to be n minus 3 times n plus 1. Okay, all over. And then how about the denominator? Well, that one's m plus 2 and m plus 2. Okay. Now, at first glance here, you might be like, whoa, wait a minute. This n minus 3 is in the numerator along with the n minus 3. They're not going to cancel. But don't forget we have this negative 2. And remember that when you raise something to a negative exponent, that's the same thing as doing the reciprocal. So this is the same thing as saying 1 over 4 times n minus 3, 3 times m plus 2, that quantity there to the second like that. So we take that negative exponent and we move this whole thing into like the denominator here of a fraction. Okay, but remember when you do 1 over something, that just really reciprocates it. So really, what does this become? This really becomes 3m plus 2 over 4 times n minus 3 quantity squared. Okay, and let's go ahead and square it too. Oops, let's go ahead and square it too. I guess I can just put this. Okay, so we would get 9, because the square would distribute to the 3 and to the m plus 2. I'm going to leave it as m plus 2 squared like this over 4 squared, which is 16, and the n minus 3 squared. Okay, so finally this thing right here is going to be, so I'm going to replace this with this in the problem here. So we'll have 9 m plus 2 squared over 16 n minus 3 squared. Okay, times, and we'll rewrite this as well, n minus 3, n plus 1 over m plus 2 and m plus 2. Okay, now, what can cancel? Well, n minus 3 will cancel one of the n minus 3's there, so we'll just have an n minus 3 to the 1. Here we have m plus 2 squared, which is m plus 2 times m plus 2, so that'll cancel exactly with that. And so we're left with 9 times n plus 1 in the numerator over 16 times n minus 3 in the denominator. And there's our final answer. Okay, in the next video we will look at division.